Oh, so you said that started meeting hermits right away after you went into the mountains. Did you meet anyone who with some sort of a special ability, or maybe lived longer than like expected, or anyone who's quite unusual?
Well, the hermits I met, like Yuan Zhao. Yeah, Yuan Zhao. She's on the cover of the English copy of Road to Heaven. She was a very powerful monk. She was a tantric teacher, and she became a hermit near the end of her life. Usually, the usual path is it's like graduate school. You become a hermit to get your PhD. Of course, you can't get a PhD without an undergraduate degree. So usually the hermit tradition in China is some people are attracted as they go on their spiritual path. They want to go farther. And those are most of the hermits in China are on that path, the graduate school path. I'd say 90% of all hermits in China don't spend more than 5 years in the mountains. It's usually about 3 to 5 years. They're there for a period of time. They're not there forever. They're not burning the bridge with the world. The Chinese hermit has never been that kind of person. The Chinese hermits have always been an important part of society. They've always been highly respected. And the hermits have always cared for people who make up the society. So people just go into the mountains for a period to gain a certain level of spiritual awareness, certain level of insight, and they give themselves their own PhD. Nobody gives you a PhD. You decide when it's time to go down. But if you read the biographies of hermits in China, you find almost no. First of all, you can't find a biography of any great Chinese master who was not a hermit. Every Chinese master you can read about, whether they're Taoist or they're Buddhist or even Confucian, they have always gone into the mountains to spend time alone. But not forever, but they go there for a while. Usually 3 to 5 years is typical. And then they come down. So the Chinese hermit is, again, never loses this association with the society that they're part of. And they're a major part of it. And so they're still like that today. You go into the mountains, not forever, but to gain a higher insight, to go a little further, see how far you can go. But eventually you come down because you want to help others. That's what it's all about.
In your book, you wrote a paragraph, actually a whole chapter, about the cultural significance of the Zhongnan Mountain and Kunlun Mountains.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? I thought that was the first time I learned about these things. That was from your book.
Well, the reason you have the name Zhongnan Mountains in China. Zhong means end, the end of something. Nanshan, South Mountains. If you come to China from Pakistan, and where most of the Buddhism and the major Silk Road, as soon as you get to Kashgar, you turn right, and you go to Xi'an, and your entire trip from Kashgar to Xi'an, there are mountains on your right side. You're on the south. So that's the beginning of the Nanshan, really. And the Zhongnanshan is the end of the Nanshan. So really the name Zhongnanshan just refers to those mountains at the very end of all these different Nanshan, beginning with the Kunlun Mountains. The first set of mountains after Pakistan, when you get to Kashgar, you turn right, the first mountains on your right, the Kunlun Mountains. And then you get to Qinghai, to the Gansu province, the names keep changing. The names keep changing, and until finally you get past Lanzhou, and then, you know, a little bit past Lanzhou, you get the Zhongnan Mountains beginning around Tianshui. And I was amazed by that idea that this when Taoists and the earliest Taoists talk about the spiritual world, they're always talking about the Kunlun Mountains. So these mountains along the south of you, when you're traveling towards China, are sacred mountains to a lot of different people. And there are these stories, too, about the Kunlun Mountains. There was Muwang, King Mu of the Zhou dynasty. Muwang, Zhou Muwang. Zhou Muwang decided to take an army of 50,000 soldiers to Iran. Well, but that was not using the word Iran. He wanted to go visit the Siwangmu. So he wrote this record of his travels called Mutianzazhuan, and people always thought it was a myth. And then they found during of course he wrote this around 1000 AD, BC, maybe 950 BC, something like that. He wrote this record, and people thought it was a myth. And then later, during the Han Dynasty, they found a tomb with his record in it. And so he made this trip, and apparently it was a spiritual trip, and he was trying to find the origins of Chinese culture. The Chinese government doesn't like this idea at all, but apparently the earliest Chinese people always looked toward the West as where they had received their cultural heritage in a way. And one of the great, of course, deities was Siwangmu, whose kingdom was in northern Afghanistan. And so Mu Tianzi took this trip all the way to K2, to the Kunlun, which is people thought that was K2 in the on the border between Pakistan and China. And then he kept going all the way to Balkh, the ancient city of Balkh, where Siwangmu lived. And then he kept going, and apparently he was looking for the Garden of Eden. He went to the place where Christians think the original Garden of Eden is north of Tehran, about 100 kilometers or so, up near this lake, the Caspian Sea. And so his record depicts that journey, and I always wanted to take that trip, follow his footsteps. There was a professor at Huagang who has a 3-volume study of the actual journey of Mu Tianzazhuan using satellite photos and trying to correspond to his actual trip based upon his journey. His journey is just how many days I would go north how many days, south how many days. And so you can figure out his actual journey. And so these mountains, the Kunlun Mountains, sort of for these early Taoists and people like King Mu, represented it's like an origin story, and paying respects. And there are also there's stories about King Huangdi. Huangdi once sent his minister to Kunlun to pay respects. And why would Huangdi send his minister to Kunlun to pay respects, unless that meant something? So I always thought that there was early Chinese culture always looked toward the West as some kind of the mother source of certain elements of Chinese culture. Anyway, so I always was interested in that myself. So when I wrote that chapter about the mountains of the moon, it was because to sort of honor that idea that these mountains are what the early founders of Chinese culture apparently followed those mountains, always keeping the mountains right. And in the old days, there used to be a lot more water, and water, rivers coming down into the Tarim Basin today. So there's probably a very gradual migration from Persia, what we call Persia or Iran. For the Tower of Babel, when the Tower of Babel collapses and all these different groups head off in different directions. Basically the end of the Garden of Eden. And I think that's what King Mu was looking for. He's looking for the Garden of Eden and trying to go back to that land, that time when everybody was happy and they had enough fruit before knowledge, and there's a certain tribe, a group of tribes that followed these mountains all the way to China. And the origins of Chinese culture I think are based upon that thread